against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, earthquakes, signs in the sun, moon and stars. Nations will be in anguish at the roaring and tossing of the sea. Men will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world. Such things must happen. All these are the beginning of birth pains. So that means more natural disasters, more often. And it seems like we're seeing evidence of that now.
Changes in society will trigger the final events where there will be no turning back. It was predicted, and it is happening.
Lawlessness, moral decline, and the greed is good culture.
There are ambiguous prophecies in the New Testament concerning an increase in lawlessness that will take place in the last days.
There will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure.
Now that Western society has become increasingly post-Christian and neo-pagan, we find that with that trend, there is a trend towards the decline of established moral values.
Child abuse, granny rape, the drug culture, mindless crimes.
But again, it's ambiguous. It applies to what happens in society generally, but also what happens within the Christian church.
Okay, taking a look at these predictions, I'm beginning to understand how indeed these prophecies are integrated. It requires one event to precede the next, and they build upon each other to make the bigger picture. So next on the list is spiritual deception, which is apparently one of the greatest signs that the end is closing in.
Mass spiritual delusion will captivate millions as they seek signs and wonders, opening a door for the greatest delusion of all time. It was predicted, and it is happening.
Over the years, there's been an increase in the number of people that have contacted Reach Out Trust that feel they have been deceived by some churches that they went to, by some groups that they thought were Christian and were not. And they found that in the end, it's not the truth as they were told it to be. And as we began to investigate and look at this, we found it very interesting that the Bible talks about a period of time, the end of the age. And it says that in this period of time, at the end of the age, this very deception that these people have is going to increase.
The thing reiterated by Jesus the most was undoubtedly deception within the Christian church. Again, the false teachers, the false prophets, even false messiahs.
Over the years, Reach Out Trust has seen an increase in the falling away of people within churches from true Christianity. They've moved away from biblical truth.
Something has happened in recent years. The traditional gospel message has been maligned, even discredited by televangelists. Born again has become a household joke associated with religious con artistry. Unfortunately, people will tend to dismiss the traditional Christian message because of this financial con artistry that's conspicuous to everybody, ignoring the fact that Jesus himself warned it was going to happen. Many would come in his name and lead many people astray. This is something the scriptures speak of as the great apostasy, the departure from the truth.
I think most of the blame for this should be set very squarely at the foot of Christianity, which as an established religion has done its best to completely discredit the Bible as a document and make even the person of Jesus, who, if you just ignore Christianity, Jesus is an extremely attractive personality with a lot of very good things to say, but people get put off investigating these things because of the way Christianity is and presents itself.
And yet the Bible is the backbone to Christianity, is it not?
Unfortunately, the established institutionalized Christianity just tends to ignore the Bible.
We are told this is associated with the advent of the man of lawlessness, one of the metaphors for the Antichrist. And people will actually be given over to believe in him by God as a judgment. In other words, if you want false prophets, God will cause you to believe one. If you want a false Messiah, God will cause you to follow one.
The coming of this lawless one will be in accordance with the work of Satan displayed in all kinds of counterfeit miracles, signs and wonders.
But who's he warning? He's warning people who claim to be Christians, who should know better. We are seeing an apostasy. We are seeing whole denominations that at one time were biblically based and held to a biblical morality, having gone into everything from not simply religious apostasy, but even moral debauchery and a fundamental lack of financial ethics.
I had no idea that people within the church were no longer really studying the Bible, which, as I said to Dr. Biro, I thought was their main book of rules, if you like. So if people aren't studying the Bible and are not knowing what it's saying, they're therefore relying on preachers who are preaching whatever seems to be on their mind and important to them on that day.
As the world strains under the weight of humanitarian issues, mankind will desperately seek a leader, a savior, it was predicted. But will it happen?
But it is clear to all concerned that when it comes to nuclear weapons, we have reached a decisive point. This is not simply about America's interests. It's about preventing a nuclear arms race in the Middle East that could lead this region and the world down a hugely dangerous path.
There will be a convergence of calamities, environmental, economic, political, and strategic, taking place, much of it centered in the Middle East. In desperation, the world will look to a political leader and a religious leader as some kind of a redeemer figure. It's curious that as we enter the world we're in now, New Agers are waiting for someone called Maitreya. Muslims are waiting for the Mahdi. Buddhists are waiting for the fifth Buddha. Jews are waiting for the advent of the Messiah. Christians are waiting for the return of Christ. A spiritual counterfeit will come, quite possibly being all things to all people. He will be able to unite the world's faiths with a political agenda, coming as this messianic figure, posing as having a capability of restoring prosperity and stability in an atmosphere of utter chaos that has people terrified. In their terror about what's transpiring environmentally, what's transpiring strategically and economically, they will look to a man instead of to God, and they'll get one. This is the one the New Testament calls the man of sin, the Antichrist, and he will come to power assisted by a corrupted global religious system.
Is there, the possibility of one world leader emerging? Well, I would say the country which has the greatest potential to create world peace, despite all the mistakes which it has made and is making, is the US.
The people of the world can live together in peace. We know that is God's vision. Now that must be our work here on earth. Thank you, and may God's peace be upon you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The world is hungry for peace. The world is hungry for leadership towards peace. I think if people are expecting a single leader to come through and deliver, and I think a year ago I would have said clearly the clearest candidate was Barack Obama. Then I think Barack Obama himself has demonstrated that the model of a single person coming through, knocking heads together if you like, and then solving these issues, it's really never going to work.
We need a leader, and we need a core of people surrounding that leader, not just one man, but we need the leader to deliver the message. In other words, a new world order, not the sort that you hear about on conspiracy theory websites, not the sort that's all about chipping people and, control of some inner coterie, but a new world order which actually works for everyone and creates prosperity and starts with regional infrastructures and eventually moves towards a proper, prosperous, global civilization of which everyone on the planet can be proud, and which leads to a new, a new age for mankind. I'm not saying that's what we're necessarily going to wind up with. I'm saying that with the right kind of leadership, well, I'm a positive person. I mean, it's very difficult not to, to do this sort of work if you're not, because you'd be constantly depressed. But no, so what you're really wondering about is the flip side. I've presented the positive vision of the New World Order, and you're saying, what's the negative side of the New World Order? Oh, right, well, that's actually not so hard.
Cannot move towards a world government without a crisis and without people losing faith in their national sovereignty. They need to have confidence in something that'll supersede that and that'll rescue them, in essence.
We could wind up in a situation where an attack by Israel on Iran actually triggers a series of orchestrated events around the world through Iran's proxies. As a result of that, we wind up with people being scared. And they'll be scared because the war is effectively, in that case, going to be brought to their doorstep. It's not something which is happening in the Middle East. It's not something which is happening, on board a ship in the Straits of Hormuz. It's something which is actually happening in their day-to-day lives. And if there were a series of such orchestrated attacks, then I think you'd be looking at people wanting some kind of leadership, someone who could protect them. And then you would be looking at state control. They'll say, keep us safe. They will be handing themselves over to the state and saying, what can you do to keep us safe? And yes, that could result in the wrong sort of New World Order. That could result in tyranny. That could result in the rise of leaders of the Hitler type.
The victim of one world leader turning into a Hitler will be democracy, justice, freedom. There'll be nobody to fight that leader. In various countries during the 20th century, you had the rise of despots, you had the Hitlers, you had the Stalins, you had the Mao Tse-tungs, you had the Pol Pots. All at that stage, at the national level, could be contained. They caused, like Hitler, caused world wars, but there was a group of countries that fought against them, managed to stop them. Freedom was not the victim in the end. Democracy was not the victim in the end. Imagine no nation states, imagine one global government and someone like Hitler coming to power. What's to stop that? Who's to fight him?
We hope that never happens, because that what it would do for our civil liberties and what it will do for, the nature of man himself is frightening.
He, the Antichrist, also forced everyone, small or great, rich or poor, free or slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or his forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark. Revelation 20, verse 4. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony for Jesus and because of the word of God. They had not worshipped the beast or his image and had not received his mark on their foreheads or their hands. Let's watch a film.
The scriptures speak of a new kind of currency that will take place, some would suggest in the form of some kind of a microchip on the forehead or on the right hand, by which people will be able to buy and sell, but not be able to buy and sell without it. Increasingly, financial institutions are looking to new technologies to cope with this problem of finding a means of currency that will function the way credit cards do, but will not be a credit card. That will not be something that which you can easily counterfeit or easily defraud someone with. Well, obviously, implantation is the direction these technologies are generally taking.
The next revolution, unquestionably, is going to be nanotechnology. That's the ability to create structures that will manipulate matter at the atomic or molecular level. The way that could manifest is in various small chips, turning human beings into walking technology.
Implantation is already beginning to take place experimentally on humans. The essential technology already exists. Well, the book of Revelation tells us that will be a final currency. No one will be able to buy and sell without it.
Whoever controls that technology will ultimately, fundamentally control our lives. And it is very much a case that ultimately it'll be government that does control and run all of those technologies. We see now, particularly with governments nationalizing various industries, regulating various industries, they will have control, and those technologies will dominate and control our lives and can be used for nefarious purposes.
It's a whole system that is designed to collapse you down into a single official identity that the only way you can access certainly public services and increasingly live your life in a normal fashion would be if you were using your officially assigned sort of identity to confirm facts about yourself. We're not against any particular technology per se. It's that once you've got these technologies in place, if you haven't got proper safeguards, if you haven't got proper oversight, if you've just got this basic presumption, as pretty much all governments and companies seem to have, that once they've got the data, it's theirs, what they fail to see is that that data is ours. If it's about me, it's mine. Yeah? And if it's, if it's going to do something or damage to anyone, it's going to do damage to me. Yeah? Which is why it's so important that when it comes to control, the person who should be in control is me and you, and not some, overarching international, national, system that says, oh, well, in order to, earn your crust and pay for things and do this, that, and the other, you have to basically live under a constant state of surveillance. This new e-passport, which has, photograph and a chip and antenna embedded in the back of the photo page, was introduced, they said, in order to enhance security. It does exactly the opposite. The government's very fond of pointing out that I think 20 or 21 out of 24 EU states have an ID card. What they don't actually go on to sort of mention is the fact that the vast majority of those, 19 of those, were imposed on their populations or extended to cover the entire population under either Nazi or Soviet occupation or a homegrown dictator. And we have to learn from history on this one. We can't just assume because, it's the 21st century now, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, all these people, that's all in the history books, that all happened then, it couldn't possibly happen again. I'm afraid that would be very, very naive. The very fact that one person can be identified as being a part of one group and another person can be identified as being another group can end up being a death sentence.
So we've really got to examine whether these prophecies that were made, let's not forget, over 2,000 years ago, is the technology there when they were talking about, Jacob was talking about the mark being on the right hand, or on the forehead, the mark being a potential microchip containing your banking details, so your credit card or your credit history, and your ability to buy and sell. Well, when you examine it like this, you think, well, this is the technology is unquestionably there. I have 2 dogs; they're both chipped. The wherewithal is there. It's a relatively simple process, and it certainly can happen. It may probably be happening in test sites around the world as we speak. Scary to think about it. And another thing that crosses my mind is it's clearly stated that it's the right hand. Why would it be the right hand? What significance is that? And if you don't play ball with these people, you get your head chopped off. In what part of the world would that happen? Does that happen? It's certainly worth thinking about.
Many will strive for peace in the Middle East, yet prophecy indicates Russia, Iran, Turkey, and others will war with Israel. It was predicted, but will it happen? Both the book of Revelation and the prophet Daniel speak of this last 7 years of human history being divided into two halves. At the onset of this 7-year period, a peace treaty proposing to bring peace to the Middle East between Israel and the nations surrounding it will be inaugurated, which will be broken halfway through by this person whom we call the Antichrist. This person who's going to come, try to persuade the Jews he is some kind of a deliverer figure and bring a peace to the Middle East, but he will also not simply deceive Israel. He will deceive the nations. He will come as a man of peace, but he'll actually be a man of war.
If you look at the history of the resolution of intractable conflicts, it's often the most radical people, the ones most stuck in the mud, most difficult to move, who in the end are the ones that create peace, primarily because they are able to bring the majority of their constituency with them. I'm optimistic still that a figure like Netanyahu can create consensus or move Israel in the right direction. That's not based on any fact, because anybody that looks at the situation today, anybody you talk to, will be quite pessimistic about the outcome. But solutions can come out from nowhere.
If Israel is going to survive, it has to become part of a wider architecture, and that is going to have to be orchestrated by the US.
Too much blood has been shed. All of us have a responsibility to work for the day when the mothers of Israelis and Palestinians can see their children grow up without fear. When the Holy Land of the three great faiths is the place of peace that God intended it to be.
Does the US step up to the plate, or doesn't it? We'll wait to see. We hope the news will be good, because if not, I see a very, very destabilizing effect for the region and for the world.
Notice now how many people have pushed for peace treaties and they've not worked. Oslo being one of them. Oslo I, Oslo II, Camp David. None of these peace treaties have been able to deliver what they promise. Well, none of them will be able to deliver what they promise. The worst is yet to come. Daniel also predicted that when these events do transpire, we are going to see Persia, that is Iran, emerging as a strategic threat to Israel's existence, leading up to some kind of a terrible conflict.
Today, an unprecedented threat to humanity looms large. A radical Iranian regime, armed with nuclear weapons, could bring an end to the era of nuclear peace that the world has enjoyed for the last 65 years.
I mean, yes, Ahmadinejad has made these statements, but again, they can be explained in terms other than desiring a nuclear holocaust.
Do I really think, despite the rhetoric Ahmadinejad's used about wiping Israel off the face of the earth and so on, I don't think so. I really don't think that's what we should be worrying about.
I think a more likely scenario for the exchange of nuclear weapons is things getting out of control. You've got the Israelis with nuclear weapons. They're unlikely to use them, I would say, first, but they might get into a threatened situation and then find that it's very difficult not to use them.
If you had a situation in which Israel went to war with Iran, how is Iran going to respond? Well, it's going to respond through its proxies. And this is where you wind up with a global catastrophe. Because they do have capability. Whether we like it or not, they have capability in probably on every continent, in every city, and maybe even in many smaller regions around the world. And we know that. So it will be very difficult to prove who's doing what, but we will suddenly see at that moment a spark of international terrorist activity, some of which will be copycatting, much of which will be inspired as a result of or orchestrated directly through Iran. So I think that is the greatest danger, and that's the thing that needs to be avoided.
Why would Russia align itself with Iran when Russia itself is afraid of what Iran represents, Islamic fundamentalism? It does not seem to make any strategic sense or any logical sense, except that Russia could see Iran as a mechanism to bring about such an instability in the Middle East where Arab oil would no longer be reliable and the value of Russian oil and natural gas would go through the roof, making Russia the new Saudi Arabia. That is one possible explanation some people have cited. Whatever explanation you wish to give to what seems to be illogical behavior by Russia by arming Iran, by giving it certain kinds of technologies, one thing is for sure. We are told by Ezekiel, Russia, Turkey, and certainly the nations of Soviet Central Asia, as it was once known, will come into some kind of a military confederation with Iran in order to invade Israel, but it will fail due to divine intervention that will in part involve natural disasters.
Now, Russia has actually used Iran in many respects up to this point. Russia has assisted them with the development of their nuclear program.
The Iranians are clearly Islamic. They are an Islamic revolution, and therefore they have a dangerous role to play in terms of an example to the Central Asian states, where there's, again, very strong Muslim populations which threaten the territorial integrity of Russia. Nevertheless, in terms of strategic relationship,